All right. I think we are ready to get started here. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Thank you so much for dialing in and spending a little bit of your day with us today. And hopefully we will, in exchange, provide some great information for you as well. But before we dive into talking about winning multi-channel marketing, I just wanted to spend a few moments to cover a couple quick housekeeping items specifically related to the console in which you are watching this webinar. So if you look at the bottom of your console, you're going to have a series of widgets that you can click on to manipulate several things and gain access to additional information. So from right to left, they are the help widget. So if you're not hearing me right now, for example, this would be a good place to go in and troubleshoot your audio. But if you're having any other issues with the broadcast, you can click in there to connect with the Technical Support Center. Second one is the media player widget. You can use this to control the volume on the broadcast. You'll also want to make sure that the volume on your computer is turned up. Next widget is the slides widget. This is where you'll be seeing the slides that we'll be sharing today. You can actually click and drag on the corner of that box to make it bigger or smaller if they're appearing a little too small for you. Next is the resources widget. This is going to give you access to a couple of additional helpful resources that have been provided both by Lob and Blueshift that relate to some of the content that we're talking about today. And then lastly is the questions widget, and this, frankly, is the most important widget. So if at any point in time during this broadcast, if we say something interesting, if we say something that's thought-provoking, if we say something that you want to learn something more about, go into that Q&A widget and log your questions. We've got lots of time today, and we'll spend as much time as we possibly can at the end of this broadcast to address your questions. So with that, let's dive in a little bit more. I'm very excited to be talking today about omnichannel marketing strategies, and I'm very excited to be joined by Josh Francia, who is the Chief Growth Officer at Blueshift. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about how e-commerce is changing the nature of customer engagement, how data is driving a growing emphasis on lifecycle marketing orchestration. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about direct mail. I suspect that not everyone in attendance has a ton of experience with sending mail, so we'll talk a little bit about that channel and how it can be leveraged as part of these broader omnichannel campaigns. And then, of course, we'll actually dive into 3 specific examples and a little bit of a demo just to show you how some of these solutions can work. And then, of course, finally, as I said, this is an interactive session. That's the beauty of the webinar format. You have an opportunity to ask questions. So again, at any point in time, as we're going through the content, please log your questions in the Q&A widget, and we will address as many of them as we can. So before diving in, it's probably worth just introducing ourselves. Certainly some of you may be familiar with Blueshift, some of you may be familiar with Lob, and some of you may not be familiar with these. So quickly, as an introduction, I'm Michael Peach. I lead product marketing for Lob. Lob is a direct mail automation platform that gives businesses better visibility, flexibility, and control in their offline communications. So what does that mean? It means we automate the creation and sending of physical mail, whether that's for marketing advertising purposes or even for transactional mail like billing statements, or even in compliance mailings like explanation of benefits, cancellation of covers, adverse action letters. We allow companies to automate the creation and distribution of the physical mail that they send to their customers. And now let me introduce Josh, who's going to talk a little bit more about Blueshift.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, Josh Francia, Chief Growth Officer at Blueshift. And Blueshift is a customer data activation platform that combines customer data, AI, and multi-channel engagement in a simple, easy-to-use, scalable platform. And what that really means is it allows marketers to achieve multi-channel relevance at scale by enabling automated campaigns across email, SMS, mobile push, in-app, social, search, and direct mail, including using Lob. So now we're going to talk about the first part of our webinar is talking about how do you do multi-channel orchestration for omnichannel campaigns. And so what I like to talk about here is how much everything has changed. So we've noticed, if you go back to the mid-90s, most households essentially interacted with the internet using a household email address and a household computer. It was mostly AOL, maybe Netscape, is how we interacted with our brands and the internet at large. You move to the early 2000s and we start to see the things getting a little bit more personalized with laptops and a few social networks starting to pop up. And in the mid-2000s, really things start to get really interesting. The iPhone comes out, social media starts to explode, and now all of a sudden, we are interacting with the internet in a personal manner and on personal devices. And in the late 2015, things have just continued to expand. Now we have the internet with us. Everywhere we go, the internet's with us. And now by 2019, the internet is almost, we expect it to be everywhere. And I was actually walking with one of my daughters in the woods a few weeks back, and in the middle of the woods, she's 5 years old, in the middle of the woods, we're having this nice walk, and she stops. And she just pauses and she says, "Alexa, what's the weather today?" And she fully expected to get an answer that Alexa would just start talking to her from the woods. And it's that world that now our customers are in. They expect the internet to be everywhere. They also consume and produce information and leave it everywhere on the internet. And so in 2005, only 7% of Americans had a social profile. In 2019, Americans have an average of 7 social profiles and almost 7 connected devices. So what does that mean? It means that customers are now interacting with our brands in a very different way they did 10 to 15 years ago. And so they're not interacting with us just in one channel or one device. They're interacting with our brands on all channels and all devices. And so that's good, right? Because now we have a lot more data. They're leaving so much more data than they ever left before, so we can use that data. It's so great we have all this data. Problem, though, is it's usually pretty siloed, and it's sometimes not very clean. And so it's hard to make use of the data and hard to really activate it in a meaningful way. And so how do you do that, right? What is the big thing here is how can you activate the data in a way that you can actually use the data that your customers are giving you to make their experience more engaging and actually more meeting their expectations. So here's how we think about that. It's a multi-channel workflow. First, it starts with this customer that's producing all of this data, and it's come from a variety of places. But then it's not enough just to have that data. You need to unify it into a profile, and then you need to build important predictions using that data to actually know what to show and how to show and when to show your customers. So first, it's the purchase intent. So what is your customer likely to purchase? What should you recommend to them? What content or products would resonate with your customer? When's the right time to engage with them? And where is the right place to engage with them? And then what you can do, if you can orchestrate all these things together in one platform, you actually can produce one-to-one, highly personalized, highly relevant campaigns in this multi-channel, multi-device world we now live in. And all the information that starts and is produced on all these ads and direct mail pieces and things like that gets back to that customer profile, so everything is constantly updated. And so, you need to do this for every single customer all at scale. That's what customers expect now. Customers realize they're producing a lot of data. They expect the experiences, wherever they're interacting with that brand, to also be extremely relevant based on the data they've been producing. And so we talk a lot and we think a lot about activating data. Well, what does that mean? Well, the more data you actually have from your customer, you can use AI to predict and make more relevant experiences for your customer. The more relevant the experience the customer has, the more engaged the customer becomes. And when they're more engaged, they actually leave more data for you to can build better and more accurate predictions, and this flywheel really starts moving. So when you activate your data, you activate growth. And we have a getting started with activating data in the Resources Center here on the webinar, and we'll send that out to everyone that attended. But it's a quick start guide on how you can get started with activating your data.
Cool. Thanks so much, Josh. And thank you for that incredible forward-looking view of where technology is driving customer communication. I want to pause for a second and actually go backwards a little bit and talk about an older technology, but one that is changing rapidly, and that's direct mail. So, but before we do that, I want to ask a question, because I always like to poll the audience before we dive into this, which is specifically, I want to see how many people currently use direct mail, either in your marketing campaigns or just broadly as part of your customer communication. So pushing that out for just a few seconds for folks who are on the webinar, just take a few minutes, simple yes/no question. Let us know if you currently use direct mail. And this is where we would normally start playing the Jeopardy music in the background. All right. Well, let's see what we have here. Oh, pretty good breakdown. We've got folks who are very familiar with mail. About 65% of you are currently sending direct mail. About 35% don't. That's interesting. This is actually a higher skew than I've seen on some of our previous webinars, so good on everyone who's starting to embrace and use this channel. So let's talk a little bit more about direct mail. As I mentioned, this is often kind of an antiquated channel, but one of the reasons it still gets used a lot, and I think certainly why a lot of people certainly attending today use it a lot, is the fact that it works, right? Just standalone direct mail, even cold outreach direct mail has, on average, about a 13% higher, 13 times, not 13%, higher response rate than email. But I think what's really interesting, especially when we're talking about the world of omnichannel and lifecycle communications, is that when you start looking at direct mail in the context of an existing customer relationship or in the context of a multi-channel marketing campaign, those response rates skyrocket. So when you can tie together a direct mail outreach with a communication in another channel, with a customer that you already has experience with your brand or with your company, suddenly that starts to become an incredibly powerful way to communicate with customers. Right, so then the important question that comes up is, if so, why, when we talk about the things that Josh was talking about, when we talk about personalization, when we talk about understanding customer preferences in the products that we offer, when we talk about being very precisely timed in the communications that we send, why does none of this show up in the direct mail channel? And I think the easiest way to explain this is visually. So I don't expect anyone watching the webinar to actually see this legibly, but this is an actual map of a direct mail process. It's been genericized a little bit from one of our customers. Right? This is what they go through every single time they send out a campaign via direct mail. There are lots of people involved, agencies, vendors, postal agencies, freight companies, lots of approvals, lots of back and forth. And what this company experienced executing this process was very simple, that it took anywhere from 30 to 90 days of lead time to get a campaign out the door. And this is not unusual. Even for people sending mail today, because the process is slow, because it's antiquated, because it has a lot of manual back and forth, it's very long. And so what that usually means in practice is, although the channel works, the campaigns that are executed via direct mail are often completely separate and siloed from any of the ongoing lifecycle communication, omnichannel communication that's being powered out of solutions like Blueshift. Right? That customer data, other than address data, isn't being brought into the equation. And the timing of these communications is utterly irrelevant to points in time in the customer lifecycle. Right? So this is really the challenge that we set out to solve with Lob, is to bring a level of technology innovation to this process, and probably more importantly than that, simple automation, as a way to make direct mail behave much more like these other channels that we have available for customer communication, right? And so what this looks like with automation is, first off, this ability to do triggered sends, right? So send a piece of direct mail based on a specific customer activity, based on a specific customer milestone, right? So simple example, if I abandon a shopping cart, or if it's been 30 days since I came back to a site, or in the insurance industry, if my policy is about to expire and I need a renewal, right? Can we time a piece of direct mail to go out and engage the customer right then and there and bring them back in? Personalization. Direct mail is often generic, again, going back to that process, because it has to be sent in very large batches. By timing these one-off pieces of direct mail, now we can provide the same level of personalization that we do in digital communications. And that means customized messaging, it means customized content, it means product recommendations can be swapped in and out, and even different mail form factors for different customers, right? Some people might respond better to a letter in an envelope, and some might respond better to a large format glossy postcard. That flexibility is extended to marketing teams as well. The other thing that's really important, of course, is speed and getting mail in home quickly. Again, if we have a 60-day lead time plus postage time, the time from when we want to send a mail to when it actually ends up in a customer's mailbox is going to be pretty long. But with automation, we can get mail out much more quickly, often in a matter of just a few days. And then, of course, the flexibility of automation allows for much more rapid testing as well as measurement of mail. So putting that all together, if we look at sort of the omnichannel campaign mix, we have a number of channels available to us today, whether that's email, SMS, or even sort of in-store experiences. But by adding this layer of direct mail, now we've taken another level of engagement and, frankly, a physical at-home engagement and added it into the mix. And what this means for marketers, when we talk about personalization, of course, personalization applies to content, but it also applies to channels. Customers are going to respond differently to different channels, and having this arsenal of direct mail in the mix, this highly respondent channel, gives marketers more opportunities and more ways to test, measure, and increase the engagement they're getting from their campaigns. Right?
Great.
So now, I'll get into a couple examples, and Josh, I'll let you start with the first one.
Great. Thanks, Michael. I know we've talked a lot about the importance of omnichannel campaigns and inside lifecycle marketing, and it's great to hear, right? If you have a good activation platform that allows you to connect online signals with offline signals together, it really creates a great customer engagement. And so today we'll talk about three specific ones, and we'll go into the first one here about how you can use direct mail in your omnichannel engagement strategy that really will work, right, and how you can put it all together fairly seamlessly. So, the first one is we want to make sure we're keeping our customers informed with trigger-based messaging. We know the sales process doesn't stop at the transaction, right? Especially in a lot of different businesses, there's a lot of post-transaction things that happen that if they're not done well, can leave a very poor taste in your customer's mouth and make it very hard to get your customer to be loyal to you in the future. And so timing those engagements helps reduce those friction points, and direct mail can add that extra touch that can really help your customers. So we'll walk through an example here of how we can see that happening. So LendingTree is a very broad, big company for online loans and marketplace, and they actually combined AI with weighted campaign journeys and direct mail to make a very comprehensive and really engaging customer experience. So first we hear on the left, they use Blueshift to predict which people are most interested in, the probability of those people converting on those products. Then they build out different campaigns that weigh those products. So we have a refi campaign for people that are highly likely to convert on refi, credit cards, and so on for auto loans. And automatically the people are pushed into those campaigns. And then they send out this multi-step, multi-channel campaign, which hits email, mobile push, and direct mail. And that results in a really cohesive and consistent messaging across many different touch points, both online and offline. And next, I want to show you how you can do this in the platform inside Blueshift. So we'll jump now to the live instance of Blueshift. And give me 1 second here. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. And inside Blueshift platform, we have an example here of an event-triggered campaign. And this is when a purchase has occurred. And this is for a photo books retailer called Chatbooks, one of our customers. And someone's purchased a Chatbook, and so it's a physical book they mail to them. And so they do that order confirmation. That seems pretty straightforward. Everyone kind of does these. But then there was a delay in when the actual book was going to be delivered. And so inside Blueshift, a marketer goes in and creates a couple different triggers based on the estimated delivery date. They wait 1 day after the estimated delivery date, and they find out the people that have a very high likelihood of being very loyal customers, high predictive retention. And they say, you know what, let's send this. We'll say 10%, sorry for your delay. 10% is on us off your next purchase. And they send out an email, but then they also send this inside a direct mail campaign. And so they send out a direct mail offer through Lob, also putting that 10%. Then they look at people that may not have as high of a retention score. Actually, these are people that are likely not to be retained. And so how do we make sure that this first experience is not a poor experience? So they go and build out a 20% coupon for those people and send an email, and then follow that up with a 20% mail, direct mail from Lob as well. This way, in one simple campaign that literally takes probably a couple minutes to set up, you have now created an online and offline channel that is fed by predictive intelligence.
All right. Thanks so much for the demo. It's always great to see this in action, and hopefully this provides a good view to folks as well. I want to move into our next example, which is about reactivation. And I think certainly for a lot of people, reactivating customers is something that's really, really important. And certainly in the world of retail, we see more and more a growing emphasis on customer retention. I think the fact is, as more and more of our transactions become digital, there's a couple things that have happened. One, obviously retailers don't have the same level of foot traffic that they used to be able to rely on for customer acquisition. There's also simply a lot of competition in the digital space. So for those in the audience who are digital marketers, especially on the acquisition side, know that channels have gotten increasingly expensive and the competition for customers' attention grows as well. So this is actually one of the areas where direct mail becomes particularly powerful. It provides a way to drive re-engagement with customers. It has a very high response rate, especially for customers who already have a relationship with your brand. And it simply becomes another channel, and a really important channel is a way to engage customers in the home versus through digital channels, which might lean more into work or other places during the day. So it's another place to get a message surfaced and get the attention of potential customers. Becomes even more relevant in a situation where content can be personalized. So an example I'll share here is ThreadUp. For those who aren't familiar with ThreadUp, they're actually a very successful company based out here with us in San Francisco that are a reseller of secondhand clothing. And they started purely as an online business and have grown very successfully to the point that they're now expanding into retail footprints as well. Because they are a retailer of secondhand clothes, that actually means that they have an enormous range of brands that are available for offer both on their site and in their physical stores. And they have a range of customers who shop across these very different brands. So as you can imagine, ThreadUp's got an inventory that goes everywhere from Old Navy to Gucci. And they've got a very broad segment of customers that shop each of those brands. So the biggest thing for them in their retention marketing as they bring people back in is to ensure that the products that they're featuring for different customers are particularly relevant to that customer. right? So as we go back to talk about data, ThreadUp has a lot of very specific customer data modeling, both understanding sort of retention risk for customers, but also a product affinity and brand affinity. So they know, based on that data work, they know a couple of really important things about their customers. They know, first off, when customers are at risk. So what are the behaviors that signal a customer might be about to churn versus a successful customer? And what are the products that they have in inventory at any given point in time that they think an individual customer would like or have affinity for? So ThreadUp brings these things together and actually extends them out to the direct mail channel in a couple ways. So first off, they use direct mail as a channel to re-engage dormant customers and those that are at risk of churning. The churn model basically looks at if a customer is between their second or seventh purchase and hasn't been back to the site in 30 days, that, according to their algorithm, puts the customer at risk. So when a customer falls into that bucket, a direct mail piece is automatically triggered. Then the content of that direct mail piece is personalized based on the customer's shopping history and predicted product affinity. So for example, it may not be entirely clear on the screen here, but what you'll see on this particular postcard, the first row of products features something that individual customer has purchased previously. So reminding them of something they bought before from the company that they hopefully are enjoying. And then the second line highlights a couple relevant products that ThreadUp has in inventory today that their model says customers will be interested in purchasing in the future. Okay. So by adding this direct mail touch to their campaigns, they were actually able to increase their repeat purchase rate by 20%. So a really good example of using direct mail as a customer for customer re-engagement. The next section that I want to talk about is digital unsubscribers. I think all of us, certainly all of us in the marketing space, have a certain percentage of our database that is growing of email unsubscribers. So I think the way to think about it is on average, the industry sees about a 1 to 3% unsubscribe rate, but you hit that every time you send an email. So as you constantly communicate with your database, there's this growing percentage of unsubscribers. And historically, marketers have treated email unsubscribers in a very hands-off manner. They're walled off. We can't communicate with them. They've opted not to receive communication. I think especially in the world of GDPR and CCPA, brands are even more reluctant to engage with or even find potential ways to engage with email unsubscribers. But because someone unsubscribed from email, it doesn't necessarily mean they're uninterested in having an engagement or a conversation with your brand. And in fact, they might still have a lot of brand affinity. They've just opted out of a particular channel, which goes back to the point that I was making earlier about channel preference being an element of personalization. So when a customer exhibits a channel preference, all that means as a brand, I have an opportunity based on that understanding to then engage a customer in the channel that they prefer, in the channel that they would like to communicate with my brand in. So I always love to share this example because I think it's a really interesting one. So for folks who are not familiar with ThirdLove, they've built a very, very successful brand that focuses on women's intimate apparel. They have been actually quite disruptive in this industry and stolen a lot of market share from existing retailers. They're a direct-to-consumer brand, actually also based here in San Francisco. We have kind of a theme today with all of our examples. But ThirdLove was looking to augment some of their marketing with direct mail outreach specifically. And as they were working in their initial approach to direct mail, they wanted to run a number of tests. And they created a couple of different segments to sort of test out the viability and response rate that they would get with the channel. And one of the segments or cohorts that they created for that initial campaign test was their email unsubscribers. And then as they ran the test, they saw something really interesting. the highest response rate of all the different cohorts that they tested was their email unsubscribers. So that group of people who had opted out of email communication responded to the direct mail outreach at the highest rate. And that makes a certain amount of sense if you take a step back and think about it, right? A decent and perhaps large percentage of their email unsubscribers, as I said earlier, were not disinterested in having a conversation with the brand. They liked Third Love. They liked the brand. They liked the products. They were simply indicating a channel preference. They were getting too much email and didn't want to interact with the brand that way. But like a lot of retail marketers, when people unsubscribed, then they got no communication whatsoever. So these people had heard nothing from Third Love from the point that they had unsubscribed. So when they finally did get that touch through direct mail, the novel, interesting, and channel that's not oversaturated, they responded immediately. So Third Love sort of took these learnings and has built out an entire communication strategy for email unsubscribers as a result. So now when a consumer opts out of email, they actually get moved into a nurture campaign that's run entirely through direct mail touches. So there's a follow-up that goes out when someone unsubscribes, and then again, at important milestones in the customer journey, which is usually about 12 months for Third Love, they send out these follow-on direct mail pieces as a way to re-engage customers, bring them back in, and have them shop some more. So really interesting use case that I always like to share because it shows the power of direct mail, or not only the power of direct mail, but the importance of understanding channel preference as part of personalizing your campaigns and messages. So with that, I was going to share some upcoming events where you could learn some more about the technologies we were discussing today, as well as interact with us. However, unfortunately, due to some of the events or the issues related to the coronavirus, both of these events have either been postponed or canceled. So although we will be at Shop Talk later this year, it won't be until September. And same goes with the MarTech conference. So that having been said, stay tuned. We'll be looking at some ways to reach out and share some more about our solutions, probably in the virtual event format, and we'll follow up with all folks. And hopefully, if we can get through all of the current situations, we'll have an opportunity to interact with everyone who would like to face-to-face a little bit later this year. So with that having been said, as I said before, we wanted to take some time to address any questions you might have, and we definitely have plenty of time to do so. I see that there are a number of questions that have been asked, and that's great. So let's...
Michael, just to clarify, the MarTech West conference is still on as of right now. So we do plan on attending. Blueshift will be there as long as the conference is live and still goes on. So we look forward to meeting anyone that wants to talk to us at that time. Again, it could change, but as of right now, it's still on.
Oh, my apologies. I had thought that was that had been postponed as well. Well, great. Then perhaps we will be able to interact with some of you at the MarTech conference. All right. So diving in, a couple of questions here. First one, actually, I think this is a great one. Do you have any examples of the travel industry where it's not a product being sold and the purchase cycle is not as frequent as physical products? What sort of personalization might be used aside from room type or past travel dates? I think that's an excellent question, and we actually do have, at Lob anyway, we have several customers in this space. I think the example that I'll note is Booking.com. So folks who are familiar with Booking, travel booking site who works with us, there are a couple other folks in that space who work with us as well. The personalization that we see in the travel industry that's done for both of those examples is both timing, so understanding when a particular consumer usually takes a vacation. So the model that Booking uses specifically is they will have a sense of when a particular customer takes a vacation, and they usually try and get an offer out right before that time because they want to ensure that as the customer is starting to plan their vacation for that year, they will come back to the booking platform to do it versus going through a competitor or other platform. The second thing will be types of destinations. So they'll look at what sort of vacation does a particular customer start to use. And that might be, do they prefer beach vacations, mountain vacations, cities, regions of the world, and feature those as part of the content as well. So a couple examples of some things that we see in the travel industry. Let's see, follow-on question here. Are there any limitations to the type or format of mail that you send? What about pieces that require envelopes or stick-on items? Is something you're able to execute? Great question, and I'll answer it in sort of two-part. Generally, Lob supports, I assume this relates to Lob, Lob supports several different sizes of postcards, 8.5 by 11 letters, either trifold for smaller or large envelope for pages, I think more than 6 pages. Letters can be color or black and white. And then we have some additional mailing options. We can also customize the envelope for letters with custom logos and imagery or printing and things like that. So that's the extent of what we provide. That having been said, sometimes customers have specific needs that may not be suited by our default product, and depending on what those needs are and what it looks like, sometimes we can accommodate them. So if there are further questions specifically, this would be a good opportunity to reach out to our support team at Lob with those questions, and they can provide some more detail. All right, so a couple questions to move on to. And again, folks, as you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A window. We will address as many of these as we can. Next question that we have is, what kind of data systems or tools should be managed to run an effective omnichannel marketing campaign? So Josh, this sounds like it might be a good one for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to you have to figure out a way to first kind of pipe your data into to get into a unified profile. So there's a lot of CDI tools out there that do a really good job of managing piping of data. And then you need an activation platform that allows you to take that piped data, clean data, and make it into profiles. So Blueshift obviously is an activation platform that does that. And then you need to make sure that the platform you choose is able to connect to any channel that you may want to talk to your customers on. The way Blueshift accomplishes this, we have direct connections with Lob and email and push and on those ones. We also have a way to actually connect to internal apps and even IVRs and so on through our Cloud Apps feature. So you literally can connect your customer data and insights to any channel that you want to talk to your customers on. And that's critical. And if you don't have that, it's really hard to have a very good omnichannel campaign.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks, Josh. Following on a couple of the questions here, are retention campaigns different in industries outside of e-commerce? Now, I know we've used a lot of e-commerce examples today, and I think this is a really good question. And at a high level, I think the answer is both yes and no. I think there are consistent elements for customer retention or customer lifecycle campaigns that span across industries. I think this is probably some truth to this as well, because as subscription models make their way more into the e-commerce and retail space, it'll start looking like some financial services as well as even insurance products. So everybody's focused on customer lifetime value, and everyone's going to have certain milestones where a subscription is going to expire or a policy is going to expire, or when we want to cross-sell, whether we're cross-selling shoes with pants in the retail industry or cross-selling credit with brokerage products in the financial services industry. All of those models are still powered by data. They're powered by customer segmentation, and regardless of industry or campaign type, there's that use of data and use of various channels that make sense for customer engagement. Josh, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that one.
No, I mean, I think that more or less covers it. I kind of agree with those points.
Okay. Let's see. One more question here. What are the quantity ranges that are mailed out to be in home in 4 days? The answer from a Lob perspective is quantity doesn't matter. So our model is really built around those triggered sends that I was talking about, but we can send one piece of mail and we can send millions of pieces of mail. And again, the day that particular piece of mail is produced, as long as it's mailed first class, in the U.S., we are generally in home in about 4 days. I think the actual average for us is a little bit more than that, about 4.2 days. But yeah, there's no limit on quantity for that. All right, let's see. Follow-on question. What is the best way to track campaign performance? Should you use QR codes, unique URLs, et cetera? Great question. This is a question we get a lot. Talking to folks about direct mail, certainly, is the question of attribution. And I think in a lot of cases, this may be more relevant for about 30% of you who said you don't currently send direct mail. Folks who have experience in digital marketing or spend a lot of time in sort of the digital space are used to that sort of click-through attribution that I can get from email or you can get from display ads. So there's a CTA in the creative. We can easily track who clicks on that CTA and follow them through to measure the effectiveness of a particular campaign or a particular tactic. Unfortunately, no one has invented this for direct mail yet. And there are a couple ways to sort of proxies that can be used for that, I think, as we mentioned in the question. And we certainly see customers who do this. There are ways to add either unique URLs, unique coupon codes, or even QR codes as a way to sort of test and measure a specific response. Unfortunately, these are not quite as intuitive as sort of click-through CTAs. So typically what we recommend to companies that are trying this or teams that are trying this is certainly do try it. It's the only way to 100% measure direct attribution. At the same time, one should assume that if you are tracking attribution that way, it's going to be undercounted. Because there are going to be a lot of people who receive that piece of direct mail but might not take the extra step to redeem it using the instructions on the piece of direct mail. They might be reminded about your brand, your store, and then simply respond to it by logging in and purchasing something. So our general recommendation is to certainly look at both considering the direct attribution, but also just paying attention to the behavior of cohorts that receive direct mail. So always creating that whole cohort or that separate group, and see if you're getting lift across the people that receive direct mail broadly, as a way to measure sort of the lift and the impact of the campaign. So I think that answers, or at least addresses, all of the questions that everyone has brought in. Thank you so much for the questions. Thank you for attending. Hopefully this webinar was helpful. As Josh mentioned at the beginning, we will be sending up a follow-up with a few additional assets for you, as well as a recording of this webinar. So for folks who want to get and receive the recording, you will. Other than that, have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.